and welcome to Thursday Night Talk. This is a show where we discuss the week in Humboldt, the local issues with the local personalities, and we do talk about the local personalities too, especially this time of year. That's right, it's a primary season, love election season. I wait for it all year long, every year. There's usually something. There's usually at least one thing on the ballot around here. I'm Talvi and I'm going to be your local host for the next hour. The California primary election just around the corner, happening for a lot of people. It's happening kind of for a solid week. There's going to be early election votings or polling locations, so you can vote not just on March 5th, I believe is Tuesday, typical election day. You can also vote the week before then, depending on where you are in the county. So our last presidential primary election happened in 2020. Only 52% of our registered voters turned out and cast their ballot, which means those 52% of people made the decision for 100% of the voters. While the presidential and statewide races often get the most attention, there's lots going on right here in Humboldt County. Do you know who and what is on the ballot? Have you researched the candidates and issues? And have you made a plan to get out and vote or return your mail-in ballot? Joining us tonight to discuss the local races are North Coast Journal news editor Thad Greenson and local attorney, Democratic Park delegate, esteemed member of the chattering class and host of Redwood Wonk, which can be heard right here on KZZH immediately following the show, Eric Kirk. Welcome, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, yes. Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. Eric, you do have your election kind of op-ed up on kimkemp.com for those who want to know more, who become interested after hearing you on this show and want to know more about your opinions.
It's true. This year I did it a little differently. I've sent it in form of separate letters because usually I'm addressing the propositions, and usually there are a lot more of them than there are on the ballot this time around. There are only two measures that I vote on, for instance, one statewide and one local. So I've only shared my opinions on races that are competitive and the two propositions. So it's a little bit more limited this time around, but yes.
So speaking of the propositions, let's get to them. Let's just start with the propositions because it has one in the title, which I will say that one of the most popular shows we did was on mental health, or one of the most popular Thursday Night Talk. We invited Kim Burgell to it, and it seemed like people are very, very interested in mental health. So play like I don't know anything. What is Proposition 1 here? Let's go with Thaddeus, and may as well give your opinions while we're going into it.
Yeah, so Proposition 1, it's interesting that Eric noted that there's only one proposition on the ballot, and that's not accidental. That Governor Newsom, I guess, put a lot of pressure on the legislature not to put forward any other ballot measures. Any other propositions, really wanting to simplify the ballot and make sure folks understood what Prop 1 was about. So Prop 1 is actually kind of two different issues combined. One is a massive $6.4 billion bond measure to fund the building of residential mental health treatment facilities for both juveniles and adults in California. And then the other part is kind of a restructuring of the Mental Health Services Act to change the funding mechanisms and to mandate kind of a different mandate that county governments spend that money a little bit differently than historically has been the case.
Eric, I know you've got opinions on this.
I do have an opinion. I am supporting it, but I do think that there are some legitimate issues with it. It does basically tear into some mental health funds that were passed earlier, about 2005, that were passed, that are funded by a tax on people earning over $1 million. And the criticism of this is it's going to reallocate those funds towards the statewide initiative. The idea, of course, is that in addition to the $6.8 billion that are going to be dedicated to bonds in order to build facilities, mental health facilities, it's basically integrating the homeless issues with mental health issues, since there's a huge overlap there, and basically reorganizing the whole system. And there are a lot of local mental health programs that are worried but that they're going to be competing for those funds, and they're worried naturally about their own funding.
So that's kind of what I'm getting from it, that the people who are very against it seem to be concerned that there are mental health facilities that are working just fine, though the funds for those places will now go to this new new buildings, new facilities, and not a lot of talk is being, spoken about regulation of these facilities to for so many houseless and mentally ill out there. And it does go hand in hand often, because it's very hard for somebody with untreated mental illness to be functioning enough to be housed. They often end up in jail. Is this just another really horrid institution that's going to be, are there just going to be like buildings and buildings of old school 1930s insane asylums where everybody's getting lobotomies? How, there's not a lot of talk about that. There's a little bit, and it's just, is this another way to kind of funnel funds into the prison system? And instead of, now prisoners are they can get an education. There's prisoner rights, at least in California. I would not want to be in a prison in Texas, I'll tell you that much. But there's more rights for a prisoner in California than there are in other places. So if there is a mental institution, can that take away people's rights and autonomy? Would, instead of jail, people would now be going there, and what kind of treatment would they be under? So that's not a lot of happening in that proposition. It just seems like people are like, oh, money or not money. And I'm like, yeah, but what are these institutions going to be?
I mean, I think that's definitely a concern I've seen about, some of the inpatient treatment facilities, is that some of that will go to, private companies building these facilities and managing them. And I think there's a concern with that. But I think one thing that I think is important to recognize is that I think everybody, or at least most in the system, agree that there is a shortage of these beds. There are, for instance, plenty of people sitting in the Humboldt County Jail right now, only waiting for a bed to open up someplace else for them to be transported to. So a judge has decided that they do not belong in a county jail. They're better off in a treatment facility, but there isn't a bed available for them. So I think that is absolutely an acute need. On the other side is just kind of the mental health funding aspect. I think the primary concern I've heard is that because it does focus a lot of that funding, or mandate a lot of that funding, go toward homeless interventions, and dealing with folks who have acute mental illness and are homeless, that it would divert money from other services and programs like suicide prevention programs and things like that, and kind of take away some of that local control.
Yeah. And Talvi, a lot of your concerns are ones that are not really addressed in the measure itself. It's basically about creating provisions, and then the legislature and all the other agencies will create the policy for that. So, for instance, people are concerned, and rightly so, that by increasing the number of available beds for non-consensual treatment, that judges might be more likely to say, "Oh, yeah, okay, let's do that." But it does not lower the threshold for compulsory treatment. You still have to be deemed a danger to yourself or others. It's just that there's concern that judges might be a little more fast and loose, saying, "Well, look at how they're living," and have those arguments if there's that much. But to be clear, it's not that much housing. I mean, we got a lot of, thousands and thousands more people who will need it. This is just the beginning. And not all of the housing, by the way, is going to go towards mental health. A lot of the housing is just going to be housing, but but the idea is that it hasn't been working. And their argument to all of the local programs that might be worried about their funding is they're saying, look, it's not working. We got people all over the streets. We've got fentanyl deaths. record amounts. So we need to shake it up, and this is actually attempting a quasi-European model to see if it would work here, and it has had a little bit of success in other states, although it's hard to say whether or not this is a precise model. It's a complicated issue, and I always I think it's a little bit difficult, but it's a bond issue primarily to build buildings, and then it's a reorganization of the mental health. It actually names it renames it to combine mental health with addiction issues. To combine it since there is such a huge overlap between those two issues.
I think it changes to the Behavioral Health Services Act.
I think everybody agrees that something needs to be done. Does it need to be done in this manner? And I'm still learning more about it. I'm still iffy. I'll be honest. I'm still iffy about which way I'm going to vote on that one, just because there is so much information that I feel is lacking, and handing that much money into certain entities' hands can just drive it towards being a money-making thing. Though we have. Let's move on to Measure A, because that is one that is very heavily discussed here in Humboldt County. Here, Eric, you take this one. What's Measure A?
Measure A is a very long, I believe, not including the exhibits, it's 34 pages long, that basically almost completely revamps the regulatory scheme around local cannabis. It's being criticized because it did not solicit input from all of the interest holders, and it's arbitrarily making changes that are not going to work. There's a couple of provisions where there's questions about what it would actually do, and my criticism of it is that you really should have a ballot when you're doing a ballot measure, and I completely believe in the direct democracy of the ballot system. I think that's something that's unique to California. In California, it's actually considered a reserved right of the people. It's not something that the government is just giving to us. It's in the Constitution that way. It came out of the progressive movement of the early 20th century, and so it's very strong. And because of that, it can only be overturned. It can't be tweaked. It can't be changed at all. When it's passed, it can only be changed, even in a minor way, by a subsequent ballot initiative. And that's very cumbersome. And this is a very intricate, complex regulatory scheme. And this is the type of thing that should be done by the Board of Supervisors with all of the interest holders coming in, so that the board can make an educated decision based on taking into account all different interests. The problem is that there's a question as whether the board has done that, and when you get a measure like this, you have to question, have they done their job? And maybe some of these citizens got a little frustrated that the board really wasn't addressing concerns other than from a few people in setting its policy. So, but that's not good enough for me to vote for something that, in my view, a measure really should, the core parts, not including the boilerplate and a lot of the stuff, should really not be more than 2 or 3 pages long. You should be able to understand it and understand what you're passing. This is just one of those propositions where if lawyers themselves are arguing over what it will do, it's just not something you want to pass, and then you can't fix it very easily.
So I get confused with it because, one, it is 38 pages, and then it seems like, you hear the flowery words of, well, it's going to help protect the environment. It's going to bring money back somehow. Somehow we're going to keep things in Humboldt County. And then I hear from, say, all of the growers out here who are like, if you vote yes, we will hate you forever. So all the words say, really good things in a lot of it. You know, you skim it and you go, actually, this sounds really nice. So what are the growers' concerns? And this is for Thaddeus, because I know that you I don't know if you've written any specific articles. I'm sure you've heard it all from everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is easily the most divisive issue on the ballot in Humboldt this go around. I mean, I think from one standpoint, I think that clearly for growers that or farms that are in the legal permitted system, I mean, this is more environmentally restrictive. And so there are environmental protections for more strict environmental protections in this than currently exist. I don't think that's arguable. I think, the flip side of that is I think people feel like it's an overstep and it's so, there's so many ambiguities to it and potentially it's so restrictive that it would push people into the illicit market where there are obviously no restrictions. But I think that as Eric touched on, I mean, I think the primary concern of the cannabis community is that it restricts kind of any expansion, and that's not just in like cultivation square feet. That could be interpreted, or they fear it will be interpreted, and county council has said they believe it will be interpreted to mean any addition of additional structures, whether they be solar arrays or additional water storage, anything that somebody might want to do to make their farm canna-tourism friendly and things like that. And so, the cultivation community feels like it is, which feels like it is already struggling amid overregulation. Feels like this is really an overstep that would make making any changes to their current operations tremendously onerous. And that's given the changes and fluctuations in the market and this being a really new industry, they worry that it will really restrict their ability to kind of adapt and pivot and add additional uses and add additional functions. Given, as Eric said, that any changes to this need to go back to voters, which is inherently a couple year process.
It's another one of those that I just it feels so iffy because you say things like, again, I hear what everybody's saying, but then I hear, oh, we'll go back to like unregulated, wild, wild west life, and everybody's just going to sell under the table. And I'm like, can you get 200 for trimming a pound again? Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. And I hear, is this going to be helping? So if I vote no, does that help the current growers with their current permits? Is that why my friends they did spend a lot of time getting those permits? It was not easy. There were so many loopholes to go through, a lot of finances to give to get into the legal field. And I understand, like, I'm going to vote with how my friends who will be affected vote and tell me to, because I don't own a grow. Though, so if I vote no, they get protected. If I vote yes and everybody else votes yes, we go back to the Wild West of like marijuana growing. Is that the case?
I mean, candidly, I don't think we're ever going back to the days when there's 15,000 grows in the hills of Humboldt. I mean, I think that's a bygone era. And I think core regulate. I think all the talk about regulation is super valid in the way cannabis is regulated. But the primary issue that's affecting farmers in Humboldt County is the vast overproduction of cannabis throughout the state. And that's not a Humboldt County problem. That's a statewide problem, and particularly, a down South Central Valley problem where you have kind of massive grows. I mean, this measure talks about large scale cultivation. I mean, we have a couple very limited instances of large scale cultivation, quote unquote large scale cultivation in Humboldt, but it's nothing in comparison to what we see in Santa Barbara and other areas of the state. We are really operating on a boutique scale in comparison.
That is the key word for Humboldt County grows, very much boutique for the Oprah of the cannabis industries out here. As fancy as all else. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back here on Thursday Night Talk in just a moment. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talk. I'm your local host, Talvi. I'm here with Thad Greenson from, I guess, mostly the North Coast Journal, though also, respectively, quite a lot of other things going on in your life, as well as Eric Kirk, who is just our brainiac and local Redwood Wonk, which you can catch his show right after this. Get that wonky feels in. There's something about that theme song for Redwood Wonk that it puts me in the mindset of being able to just listen to you and either David or whoever your co-host is that week. It's just kind of weird. So I recommend Redwood Wonk to everybody. We just talked about Measure A as well as Prop 1. We are discussing the elections in Humboldt County. Where Humboldt County is the kind of the boutique sort of situation for grows, which I wish we had more time to go into, like, how does the measure like not affect that, because I'm still confused by it all, which that happens. For those who are listening and like, Talvi, you're being an idiot, let me give you all the answers. Cool. Here's the phone number: 707-498-4146. Text us your comments, messages, ideas, concepts. You can tell me to go shove that proposition where the sun don't shine. Cool. You do you, boo. It's going to be filtered by my producer, luckily. And now let's get into the state assembly, because this is a big one. We've got a few of the runners hanging out in Humboldt County this last week. Ariel being one of them. Rusty lives out here, so it's expected to see him. He's a neighbor. That's how that works. So Eric started the last one. Thaddeus, what's up with the state assembly?
I mean, I think this is just from a reporter's standpoint. I think this is an absolutely fascinating race, this go around. So Jim Wood, the incumbent, announced kind of unexpectedly that he was not going to seek what would have been his final term due to some family stuff that he wanted to focus on, wanted to be a caretaker for his mother. And so that really kind of opened up the field massively. A few years early. And so, as you said, Rusty Hicks is a Humboldt resident and is running. He's a relatively new Humboldt resident, though. He moved up here a few years ago and is a bigwig in state politics. He's the state Democratic Party chair and has quite a resume to his credit. And then, which, I think is unusual to have kind of somebody who's considered a party heavyweight running from Humboldt County for that seat. Generally, we see, folks from the southern reaches of the district running. But he's joined in the race by Michael Greer, who is I think the sole Republican in the race, and is a school board member up in Del Norte County, and a former special ed teacher. And then I've got Ted Williams, a Mendocino County supervisor, Chris Rogers, a Santa Rosa council member, who is kind of, I think, fits a little bit more into that traditional Santa Rosa area Politico running. And then Ariel Kelly, as you mentioned, who's the mayor of Healdsburg. And then Frankie Myers, who is the vice chair of the Yurok tribe, and if elected would be, I think, just the second Native member of the legislature. So it's a pretty interesting field coming from a lot of different perspectives.
Definitely. Eric, thoughts on this one?
There are some conspiracy theories around the Rusty Hicks thing. I don't buy into them, but he is accused of being a carpetbagger. He, of course, Thaddeus noticed, is the head of the California Democratic Party. There is a theory that this was part of why Jim Wood is resigning when he retiring when he is, and they brought Rusty Hicks up here to make sure that a party insider gets elected rather than a progressive. I think that other than Michael Greer, all of the other candidates are considered more progressive, however you want to define that, than Rusty Hicks. And the idea is that the way it works in the so-called jungle primary in California now is each party doesn't select its own candidate necessarily. It's all of them run in one, and the top two voters move on. And unlike the county supervisor races, it doesn't matter if one gets over 50%. The top two vote getters, whether it's 90 to 10%, will run off in the next election. So the conspiracy theory is that Rusty came in with all of the money behind him and all of the backing, and so you've got all these progressives splitting the vote, and Michael Greer with the R next to his name will basically slip in, even though there aren't that many Republicans in the district. He's going to end up being the person to be slaughtered by Rusty Hicks. And so who is the top progressive? It's not entirely impossible that one of those progressives can slip ahead of Greer. And if it's, I mean, I lean towards Ariel Kelly. You asked me to give my opinion, but I'm fine with Chris Connor. I'm fine with Mr. Myers. And I don't know Ted Williams, but I'm sure I'd be fine with him, given that he's in, I think, the 4th district supervisor in Mendocino, which is traditionally progressive by any reasonable designation. But that's what's going on. Is you've got basically 4 progressives, a party mainstreamer, and then the Republican, and it's a very interesting discussion, and it's gotten pretty contentious lately, especially with a PAC attack ad against Rusty Hicks that may or may not be fair, and Rusty is actually threatening to sue over it.
He is, and he's planning on suing those behind Ariel's, because that's where her funds are going to an attack campaign for Rusty Hicks, which is
her sisters. Her sister. She can't.
Oh, it's not her. Sorry, it's her
right.
sister. Yeah,
she can't even talk to them.
Yeah,
she can't even talk to them. So she may not have, if the rules were followed, she shouldn't have even known that it was coming down. And but it doesn't look good that her sister is one of the primary funders of the PAC.
It looks really, really awful. Like, this isn't just, it doesn't look good. It's like, wow, like you could have been a candidate that a lot of people could have respected. You could have gotten your name out there, whether you won or not. And the first thing you did is like, I talk to my sisters, like they live across the country. I talk to them, that's just, do you not have a familial, like, your sister should recuse herself from whatever job she's doing if that's what she's funding. It feels very not okay on that sense. Right. It just feels like an icky tactic
and I don't even know if the sister knew it was happening. She's a funder, but I don't know that she's directly involved with it. So it's it's a difficult situation there. She's obviously not going to slam them or denounce it. That hasn't happened. So it's but we'll see if the lawsuit actually happens. I don't think the lawsuit would be successful. It's a political campaign, and a successful lawsuit for defamation in those situations would open up a floodgate of lawsuits every time. It's not going to happen, but I think it's posturing.
Which I do feel like we have, it is an interesting mix of candidates, and I don't think all of them, I know they're all Democrats or supposedly Democrats, though I do feel like Frankie is more moderate conservative side of things, which, it is cool that this brings, they had their first candidate forum and it was on tribal land at Blue Lake Casino, which that's the first time that's happened in California, that they actually had the, not contestants, all the runners, candidates at the forum. That's what they call it, the candidate forum. That is cool. And then again, it's one of those weird situations where I'd be hearing different things from different people. And some people are like, oh, ew, Rusty Hicks. And then some people are like, oh, no, great, because I work in that, barely above poverty line here. And I love a good union representative. I love someone that backs unions, though it, Democratic or state Democratic chair, can they be backing unions that much if they are sitting in that high political seat? Like, you're trying to figure out the candidate that's best for you as a person, and that's hard to do. Any final thoughts on that, Thaddeus?
I mean, I think his role in the race is really interesting. I think it's an interesting dynamic to have the the party chair actively running for office while holding the party chairship. And yeah, and I think it's also just an interesting race to kind of that he's an interesting candidate in a race that kind of turns a lot of the the historical dynamics in the second district kind of on their head, and that I think one of the things that Humboldt has long kind of bemoaned is feeling forgotten in state politics, or not having a large voice in the legislature. Although that has changed with Senator McGuire and Assemblyman Wood's kind of ascension. But certainly having somebody living in Arcata with the background that Rusty has would add a new dynamic to our representation. So I think that's really interesting. As I said, and Frankie's candidacy, I think, is really interesting. Yeah.
So I keep getting. Oh, yep,
No,
go
just
ahead.
to be clear, Frankie Myers is also getting the support of the Bernie faction of Humboldt County. I noticed a lot of his supporters are coming from that, which is a formidable political force in Humboldt County.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That and the Andrew Yang gang that was out here. They were very sad that he never made it past. He didn't make it too far into the race, but there's some hardcore followers from the Yang gang that if you have their backing, you've got you've got quite a lot of people, oddly enough. So Bernie fans and Yang gang, sure. Humboldt's weird, and I love that. I would say that the way that Humboldt County people vote is not going to be the way that somebody from Los Angeles votes. Eric, you are muted if you were trying to talk. Oh, okay. I keep getting my producer seems to be obsessed with the Judge Crease situation. Crease, Kreis. So who wants to start that off and let people know what's going on? Let's go Eric at first.
Well, of course, there are now three candidates in the race, and there is a write-in candidate who basically qualified and announced after I think about 5,000 votes were in. But we'll get to that. But Judge Kreis is the incumbent. Kind of interesting that the signs say re-elect when he wasn't elected to begin with, but that's being picky. He was appointed, but if you're an incumbent, I think you just have to say re-elect because you got to let them know you're the incumbent. But he is a judge who is, I believe, is appointed in 2018, and Superior Court judge, and it was a quiet kind of race. His opponent being April Van Dyke, worked for the Public Defender's Office in the South Bay, and moved to Humboldt County. And it was kind of quiet. I mean, the only issue was the lawsuit that's happened over one of the public defenders and an incident that happened at a Trinity County party in which the gentleman was allegedly thrown off the boat with certain things said. We don't have to go into that. I'm sure it's been discussed on this show in the past, but
It has not actually. We have
oh,
not
it
discussed
hasn't.
that yet.
All
Nope.
right. Well, the lawsuit settled in January, and the allegation was that the judge threw him into the water and made a derogatory term, an anti-Semitic term, against him. And was that going to have an impact on the election? Nobody knows, but it settled in January, and then all of a sudden, about a month before the election, the Commission on Judicial Performance just threw a whammy into it to us. Basically, a sort of complaint, but it isn't even really officially a complaint yet because he has a right to respond to it by I think today. Actually, I think that was the time today, and it contains I think 18 allegations. Some of them are more colorful than others. And that is actually those have actually received some national media attention. The Guardian, Rolling Stone, Press Democrat down south have all covered this because he's accused of certain sexual improprieties, drugs, and some pretty wild things. But in a way, his being judged, some of the other allegations are more important, that he failed to disclose conflicts of interest to one side or the other before presiding over a given trial. That doesn't seem to be getting as much discussion, but arguably that more pertains to a position of the judgeship. But the problem is none of this has been even had an opportunity to be proven. It's I personally think it was unfair of the commission and judicial performance to have done this. I don't believe that the conspiracy theories that it was done on purpose to affect the election. I just think they should have been conscious of the time and either held off or done this a lot earlier so all this could be vetted better. But to drop this when his attorneys were naturally going to say, and by the way, don't respond to it. And unfortunately, the responses he did probably aren't going to help him that much. It's just really unfortunate because you can't just ignore it. They're too serious to ignore. And the fact of the matter is for the Commission on Judicial Performance to have taken action on this, for them to actually do that is profound in and of itself. But what do we do with this as voters? I had decided who I was going to vote for even before for completely different reasons. But how would this have swayed my vote? I mean, I don't know what voters should do to this. I'm saying this as an attorney because it's really unfair. He cannot respond adequately in time. I mean, he can't, even before the election, forget it. People are already voting.
So who else is running against Judge Grice?
April Van Dyke and
Jessica Watson,
Jessica
Deputy
Watson
District Attorney.
from the prosecutor's office has declared a write-in candidacy. What she's thinking coming in so late, I don't know. There are conspiracy theories about that. Everybody, it's just so bizarre that there are all these wild thoughts about what's going on. The only thing I can say affirmatively is the Commission on Judicial Performance, who is apparently investigating some of this stuff for as long as 4 years, to wait this to drop this at the last moment. And I almost makes me wonder if they want to affect the election so that they can dump it off on the state bar in a month, right? I mean, it's just I don't know. But I really find it disappointing. And I say that as somebody who is intending to vote for his opponent.
Thaddeus, thoughts here?
Well, I mean, I would say that Eric's right that this is an absolute bombshell to drop a month out from the election. I don't have any questions about the commission's motives personally. It's made up of 11 members who are appointed by the governor and the Supreme Court and the legislature. I don't think they are terribly vested in Humboldt County's judicial the makeup of Humboldt County's bench. But it is, unheard of. I mean, it's unheard of, honestly, for the commission to take action against a sitting Humboldt County judge. It's happened 2 times before, and both of those were handled with public written reprimands, but not actual proceedings, which could lead to to a suspension or removal from office, or a censure. So just that happening even outside of an election year is extremely noteworthy. This is a commission that's been around, I think, for 60 years. And the severity and breadth of the charges or the allegations are just wildly vast. I mean, everything from criminal conduct to, as Eric said, failing to recuse himself from cases and failing to disclose personal relationships. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's really hard as a voter, to know what to do with that. And it's, the dynamics of the race coming in is that, it's rare for a sitting judge to face a challenge. Generally they run unopposed. And here's a case where April Van Dyke is a relatively new attorney. I mean, I think she's been practicing as attorney for about 10 years, which to run for a judge isn't a lengthy resume. And her experience in Humboldt County is even more limited. So it's a relatively unknown running against a sitting judge. And I think 7 weeks ago, I think most people would have guessed that this would be a pretty lopsided race, and it absolutely is not now.
I
And
know it's wild. So I recommend everybody listening, don't do this right now because you're still paying attention to the show, of which we will be right back in a moment. So go look up the notice of formal proceedings, RE Judge Christ. It is wild, and it like somebody needs to turn this into a TV show. It is just like such a stereotypical like good old boy like behavior, and it happens in all these local, like mentioned Double A Grill. I'm like, this is wild. Like it could have happened and I could have been sitting 2 seats down and not even known. So check that out, but not until after the show. We'll be right back in maybe like 30 seconds. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Thursday Night Talk. I'm here with Thad Greenson and Eric Kirk. We are discussing all the fun stuff about the elections. We did go over Judge Christ, and it is, again, go read that. Like, it is wild. And if you think that living in a small town is harsh, try being like somebody who's an elected official in a small town. He had like allegedly he had like a little thing with his girlfriend from the courts, and they're like, and we observed you on this date with her hand on your thigh sitting at a restaurant. It's like, whoa. Just like, whoa. Small town life. But this is supposed to be the Humboldt Superior Court judge. Is that the case? So we'll see how that goes. That's wild though. I'm like, ooh, there's a lot of people who could be in trouble if we all pay attention that closely. Like, I don't care whose hands on who's, like, that scared me for some reason. I'm not even in this. I'm like, ooh, everybody knows your business out here. So if you're running for election or office of election, make sure to not do it at a public restaurant, I guess is the answer there. Moving on to my favorite candidates in all of Humboldt County, all running against each other. We got Gordon Clatsworthy, Rex Bone. Who else do we have? There's like a few people running out. I thought it was just Gordon and Rex, and now we've got 3 others. Let's who wants to take this one over?
Well, yeah, we have Gerald McGuire is the other one that I know of. And it I'm not sure I have a ton to say about this race. I think everybody in Humboldt County at this point knows Rex Bone very well. He is a established figure in local politics, and a divisive one. But he is who he's been for I don't know, 12 years in office now. He's seeking a 4th term, and Gordon is is a relatively unknown in local politics. He's a 40-year-old U.S. Coast Guard vet, and has made himself very, very visible throughout the race. I remember maybe 6 months ago or something, he started showing up at supervisors meetings and commenting on on lots of agenda items, and has a platform that I think very probably resonates with a lot of Humboldt County residents. That's very housing focused, which I think most people agree is a huge issue locally. And then Gerald, the Fields Landing resident, has been very quiet, and I think is kind of entered this race out of nowhere, and has kind of remained on the fringes of it.
Is he a quiet? I don't feel like he's been a quiet person in Humboldt County. There's a lot of reports on his activities.
I mean, he's been very vocal about code enforcement and some things to do with his properties. I just meant as far as the larger public or po political conversation in Humboldt. I have not seen him very involved.
Uh, Gordon Platsworthy started off with what some people have seen as a disastrous interview with Ryan at over at Lost Coast Outpost, but he seems to have settled in a bit since then. And I have not had a chance to watch his the debates, but I hear he's done fairly well in that. But the problem he faces, like all the other opponents of Rex have faced, over the past decade of these runs, is this is a very probably the most conservative district of the five. It runs from the hills of Petrolia and Honeydew. Those are like the two precincts, only two precincts he really ever loses, because it's hippie town, and all the way up to basically Harris Avenue in Eureka and everything in between. Rex is well loved. I have even spoken to progressive people who, are very left wing, who say, "Hey, I would never vote for him for Congress, but he gets things done, right? He's somebody who returns my calls when I call, he's a hands-on kind of guy, and he's not going to have any control over abortion or foreign wars or anything like that in his
Thankfully,
position."
very
Here's
thankfully, he does not. Yeah.
right. So he probably he's they call him the mayor of Cutton sometimes. I mean, he's got a lot of pull, and even before he was popular for the baseball fields and the rest. So it's going to be really tough for anybody to beat him as long as he wants to hold on to that office, because he has won over that community. But never say never. You never know.
I'm very impressed with how far Gordon has come. I
Yeah.
was not I know like it's Humboldt County. We know everybody. Like, he does ghost tours and things like that. And I will be honest that I did not take him too seriously when he was running at first, especially after the article with Ryan Burns came out. And I will say, whether like whoever wins, uh, that I am very impressed with the campaign that he's put on and
Mhm.
his ability to just answer questions and be open about them. He's been on Reddit. He's been answering the Lost Coast Outpost questions. Yeah, so I'm just impressed there. So Michelle Bushnell is also running, and I don't know too much about this one, to be honest.
Well, Michelle Bushnell had a surprising win. She didn't actually think she would defeat Estelle Fennell, incumbent a few years back, and she is again considered very conservative, but she's in the cannabis industry, or closely aligned with it. And a lot of people who didn't like her at first feel like she's come into the job. Other people feel like she's kind of sold out, and so she's got a couple of opponents. And I don't know too much about the woman running from Fortuna. Maybe Thad has a little bit on her, but she's got. We have another person from the eastern part of the district who again has had issues with cannabis policy. And maybe Thad has a little bit more information than I do on that.
Yeah, so that's Brian Roberts, who's a cannabis farmer, and then Jenna McClendon is the other candidate, who's a Fortuna school board member, and I believe actually lives out on State Route 36. I don't think she actually lives in Fortuna proper.
Mhm.
But yeah, she has kind of the resume of a small business owner. I think she and her husband own a glass company, but she mentioned at the debate that they have owned a variety of small businesses over the years. And yeah, I think it's an interesting race in part because of the dynamics Eric's just kind of discussed of it was really the Southern Humboldt vote that propelled Bushnell to a very narrow win 4 years ago, and it'll be interesting to see kind of if the coalition she built then holds. She has, I think. Yeah, I think she's changed, kind of grown a lot in office. I think one of the things that folks really believed in her 4 years ago was that she was going to be a kind of an advocate for the cannabis industry on the board, and I think she has been that certainly in certain ways, and she's also, at least once had to recuse herself from what that industry felt like was a really really important vote to them, and a lot of them felt kind of disenfranchised by that move, and so I think it'll be interesting to see kind of if that holds. And then meanwhile, I think like, the city of Fortuna, kind of the largest population center of that district, was a little bit apprehensive of her 4 years ago, and I think has really warmed to her in her
Mhm.
time in as a supervisor. So I think it just creates a kind of an interesting dynamic, like I said.
And I've tried to listen to a little bit of the debates. I'm not quite sure what the issues the other candidates are running on, what Jenna in particular is running on. I don't know that I can't get it from them other than I would be better. And maybe that's fine. But I just haven't been able to put together, why I decided to run is a little bit difficult. But maybe she's better at that out in the field in the second district where she needs to do it. She, is if Fortuna is her hometown, that is the biggest concentration of votes in there. So if people know her, that could be an advantage for her.
We
As
just have
Fortuna,
to move on pretty quick.
okay.
The last supervisor seat is third district right now. Mike Wilson is the incumbent, and then there is Roy
Gomez.
Roy
Gomez.
Gomez.
Yeah.
Do we even need to discuss that? I mean,
Um,
it's entertaining, but is it? I mean, it kind of feels like there's a very clear forerunner there.
it does seem very likely that Mike Wilson will run it. It's interesting that I see Roy Gomez's signs all over the county, everywhere except for in Arcata. But it's
In the
I,
district that he's running in. Yeah.
and I see it on the cannabis businesses. So he obviously appeals to them, but he's shown up to, I guess, Eureka meetings, accused everybody of being an anarchist and stuff like that. I think he's settled down a bit for the campaign, but I just don't see him being able to cut into Mike Wilson's been in there for a long time. I think he's in the third district, what Rex is in the first district, and he's there until he wants to move on and do something else.
So we are now, let's just start the round robins. Give each of you 2 minutes and we'll see how that goes. If you go over 4 minutes each, we just gotta shut down the show. So let's start with Thaddeus. You've got like 2.5 minutes, sort of.
Just to weigh in on
So
anything I find
you haven't
interesting.
done this show before. So round robin is you whatever you want the listeners or those watching on TV to take with them. You can. Some people go completely off the walls, off topic. You can talk about the election. It's your time. So whatever you want people
Yeah,
listening to
so
take.
I mean, I guess I would just really encourage folks to dive into the races that they're interested in. There's a ton of information out there on all of these. Cal Matters has a great voters guide. So for instance, if you're interested in more information about Proposition 1, including a really, dry blow by blow breakdown of what it would do, and then also some op-eds on kind of dueling sides. Cal Matters is a great resource. Also, all of the forums that Eric and I have kind of mentioned, almost all of them were videotaped and are available to stream online. So you can look those up if you're, live in the third district and really want to see what Roy Gomez is about. Those are avenues that are open to you. Um, and then I think mostly I would just really, really urge everybody to get out there and vote. I think as Talvi said at the beginning of the show, the last primary we saw about a 50% turnout, which is just is really dismal. And I believe that's a 50% turnout of the 80% of eligible voters who are actually registered. So if you're not registered, it's not too late. Up until election day, you can walk in and register and cast a provisional ballot. And democracy is not a spectator sport. So if you want a say in the way things go, and if perhaps more importantly to you, if you want to just have a right to complain about the way things are, then vote. It gives you license to do all that.
I do want to note that the candidate forums will be from both Key and KMUD will be replaying on Access Humboldt channels, just because we want people to be informed. And also, this is just such an entertaining year for all of this. Eric, you got a couple minutes here.
Yeah, just a couple of things. At the beginning of the show, you said voting begins a week before the election, but actually you can vote anytime you want if you receive a ballot. You can put it in the mail. You could, as long as it is postmarked as of election day and received, I think by that Friday. I wouldn't wait that long, but try to get them in. It's sitting probably on your desk or on your kitchen table or wherever your mail piles up. But please, yeah, take. I mean, we didn't. There's some races we didn't discuss, like the Senate race is a fascinating one. Take a look at that one. And we are going to be holding our election on Super Tuesday, which means that there are states across the country that are holding their primaries and elections. So it's almost kind of a holiday, at least for geeks like me, to be discussing it. And actually, we're going to be doing a coverage of it, live coverage of the election night returns on KMUD. I believe Access Humboldt will simulcast it. Yes, it will. So on March 5th from 7 to midnight, you can join us for that. But yeah, a fascinating election, almost a soap opera locally, but that's where we're at. And
it is a fascinating election season. Thank you both, Thaddeus Greenson and Eric Kirk, for being on the show. Some election information, since this is important, as I like to tell everyone, like, this is an important thing. Go vote. Your future self will thank you for even participating in it, hopefully. We don't always get what we want, but we try. And if you don't vote, then you're not telling people what you want. You're voting for representatives here. That's democracy at its finest. Last day to register to vote for the March 5th, 2024 presidential primary election was February 20th, so 2 days ago. That doesn't mean you can't still register to vote and have it count, but yeah, do go into the Office of Elections out here. It is right next to where the Harley-Davidson spot was, which, less Harley-Davidson, I'm sad that they left. All California active registered voters will receive a vote-by-mail ballot for the March 5th, 2024 presidential primary election. As Eric said, make sure to check your junk mail pile. Don't just forget it. You can drop it off. Ballot drop-off locations open February 6th, so they're already open. You can go to the Office of Election. You can mail in your ballot. Voting centers open for early in-person voting in all Voters' Choice Act counties beginning on February 24th, 2024. That means in 2 days, there's going to be actual locations, and you don't have to be part of that. If you want to go to Jefferson Center, you can go to Jefferson Center to vote when they open for their few-day voting. Or if you're like, I'm in, Fortuna right now, you can go and hang out in Fortuna. Garberville, I think, only gets 1 day to vote, unfortunately. Sorry, but make sure to do that and mail in your ballots if you haven't. The vote-by-mail ballots must be postmarked on or before Election Day and received by March 12th, 2024. That's time. You've got time to do this. You've got time to go vote, so please go vote. If you are like, oh, I want to do the primaries and I didn't register, or I accidentally said I'm a Republican and now I'm a Democrat, go in and talk to them at the Office of Election. They are there to help you, and they work really, really hard to do it. If you have topics or suggestions for the show, please email us at kzh@accesshumboldt.net. Show replay is Friday evenings at 8 p.m. right here on KZH 96.7 FM, which is the station you're listening to, 96.7 FM. Kind of amazing. You can also watch this show on Access Humboldt's YouTube channel. There is literally a playlist for Thursday Night Talk that I think has like 80 hours of just me talking to other locals, which is cool. That's cool for me. My mom's proud of me. I'm happy for that. I will see everyone next week. Again, do not forget to vote. If there's so many options, it is so easy to do it these days. Get out there, get your sticker, and actually, if you got your mail in, they mail the I voted sticker to you. You didn't even have to vote to get that, and that's cool. All right, I will see everybody next week. Thanks to my guests, and thanks to my producer who puts up with me doing this, and thanks to Access Humboldt for letting me continue to be ridiculous once a week on Thursday Night Talk.